She was the ghost everyone saw, but no one noticed. A woman etched with time and silence, moving through the clangor of the maintenance bay like a whisper. Master Sergeant Elara Vance, they called her, if they called her anything at all. Most days, she was just the tech, or her, a fixture as unremarkable as the aging generators she coaxed back to life with an almost reverent touch. Dust motes danced in the shafts of sunlight slicing through the high windows of Hangar 7, illuminating her graying hair pulled back in a severe bun. The lines around her eyes that spoke less of age and more of horizons seen, of pressures endured. Younger mechanics, full of swagger and grease, sometimes joked about the old lady who preferred the company of worn-out engines to theirs. Elara never acknowledged their barbs. Her hands, surprisingly strong and deft, moved with an economy that belied the assumptions cast her way. She was tuning the vibrational frequency of a particularly stubborn power unit for the mobile command center, her ear almost pressed to its casing, listening to its mechanical heartbeat. Private Sharma, a young recruit with observant eyes, often watched her, a sense of puzzled respect dawning. Sharma saw the way Elara's gaze lingered on the distant runway, a flicker of something unreadable before returning to the task at hand. Today, like any other, Elara finished her work, cleaned her tools with methodical precision, and faded back into the choreographed chaos of the base, a shadow in plain sight. Her silence was a shield, her anonymity a carefully guarded peace. Few knew the weight of the insignia, a tiny, faded nightshade blossom tattooed on the inside of her left wrist, almost always covered by her watch strap or the cuff of her fatigues. It was a relic of a life she had supposedly left behind, a life of whispered call signs and moonless nights. Colonel Marcus Thorne addressed the assembled officers and NCOs in the main briefing hall, his voice a low rumble of authority. The upcoming readiness exercise, codenamed Iron Gauntlet, was critical. His gaze swept the room, pausing on Lieutenant Davies, a young officer whose ambition often outpaced his experience. Davies was outlining the logistics for air support integration, his presentation slick, confident. Elara stood near the back, part of the support personnel contingent tasked with ensuring all ground equipment remained operational. She was a still point in the restless energy of the room. Colonel Thorne's eyes, sharp and appraising, passed over her without a flicker of recognition, just another face in the uniform sea. "This exercise will test every facet of our capabilities," Thorne stated, his tone brooking no argument. "We need all hands focused, all systems green. That includes support elements. No weak links." A subtle glance from Davies towards the back of the room, a brief, almost imperceptible smirk, did not go unnoticed by Elara. She felt the familiar sting of dismissal, an old acquaintance. It no longer angered her. It simply was. Her expression remained impassive, her gaze fixed on the schematic Davies was displaying, noting a potential flaw in the refueling schedule for the drones, a detail overlooked in the rush for grandeur. She kept the observation to herself. Her role here was not to advise, but to maintain. The silence she cultivated was her chosen armor, deflecting assumptions, preserving an inner sanctum of memories and skills few could comprehend. The briefing concluded, and the room emptied, leaving Elara with the faint scent of floor wax and the lingering echo of pronouncements. During a preliminary drill for Iron Gauntlet, the portable communications array suddenly sputtered and died. Static filled the command tent, severing contact with the forward reconnaissance teams. Lieutenant Davies, flustered, barked orders at his technicians, their youthful faces etched with panic. They swapped cables, rebooted systems, their movements increasingly frantic as precious minutes bled away. Sergeant Miller, an older, cynical NCO overseeing the comms team, grumbled about new equipment and insufficient training. Elara, tasked with ensuring the generator powering the array remained stable, stood nearby, observing the unfolding chaos. The generator hummed perfectly under her recent ministrations. She saw the issue, a mismatched impedance adapter, almost hidden beneath a bundle of freshly routed cables, a rookie mistake easily made under pressure. Davies was shouting about a full system diagnostic, a process that would take hours they didn't have. Miller was already drafting a report blaming faulty hardware. Elara waited for a lull, a moment when their frustration peaked. Then, without a word, she stepped forward. Davies, about to object, was momentarily silenced by her quiet confidence. She reached into the tangle of wires, her fingers tracing a path, and with a slight adjustment, a firm reseating of the offending adapter, the static vanished. Clear voices flooded the tent. Davies stared, dumbfounded. Miller blinked. "Must have been a loose connection," Davies stammered, recovering quickly, eager to reclaim authority. Good, back on track." No one thanked Alara. Private Sharma, who had been running diagnostics on a nearby terminal, caught Alara's eye and gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. Ilara simply turned back to her generator, its steady rhythm a comforting counterpoint to the human drama. The incident was quickly forgotten by most, attributed to chance, a random fix. But the seed of a question had been planted in Sharma's mind, and perhaps a fleeting, unacknowledged one in Miller's. The day before Iron Gauntlet was set to commence, a critical guidance system on the primary reconnaissance drone, an aging but vital UAR nicknamed Argus, failed its pre-flight checks. Lieutenant Davies, whose career felt increasingly tied to the success of this exercise, paced the small drone hangar, his face tight with anxiety. His specialist team, flown in for this very purpose, pored over technical manuals, their faces grim. Hours passed. The hangar grew hot and close. Colonel Thorne paid a tense visit, his words clipped. "That drone is essential, Lieutenant. Get it flying." The pressure was immense. The specialists confessed they suspected a deeper, unfixable hardware flaw, suggesting the drone be grounded. Davies looked desperate. "As a last resort, more to be seen doing something than with any real hope," Sergeant Miller suggested. "Maybe Vance from Hangar 7 could take a look?" "She's good with the old gear." Davies scoffed, but, out of options, waved a dismissive hand. "Fine, get her." Alara arrived, wiping grease from her hands. She listened patiently as the specialists, with a touch of condescension, explained the complex problem, the delicate microcircuitry. She nodded, her gaze fixed not on them, but on Argus itself, tethered in its bay like a dormant bird of prey. When they finished, she walked slowly around the drone, her hand drifting lightly over its fuselage. Then, she asked for the maintenance logs, the detailed schematics. For an hour, she sat with them, cross-referencing, her brow furrowed in concentration. Finally, she rose. "It's not the primary guidance chip," she stated, her voice calm, direct. "It's a harmonic imbalance in the tertiary gyroscopic stabilizer. The feedback is mimicking chip failure." The specialists exchanged skeptical glances. Ilara, ignoring them, requested a specific set of calibration tools, ones rarely used. With meticulous care, she opened a small access panel, her movements economical and sure. She made minute adjustments, her head cocked, listening to sounds too faint for others to discern. After 20 minutes, she sealed the panel. "Run the diagnostic again." Davies, impatient, gestured to his team. The lead specialist initiated the sequence, his expression doubtful. The system lights blinked green, one by one, full system integrity. Argus was operational. Davies stared, speechless. Colonel Thorne, who had returned, observed Alara with a new sharp intensity. A flicker of something, not quite recognition but profound curiosity, crossed his face. Ilara simply nodded once, then turned to leave, the faint scent of oil and metal trailing her. Later that night, long after Hangar 7 fell silent and dark, Alara returned. The only illumination came from the soft glow of the status lights on Argus's console, and the sliver of moonlight filtering through a grimy window. She moved with a familiar ease in the shadows, her footsteps barely making a sound on the concrete floor. She ran a hand along Argus's wing, the cold metal smooth beneath her palm. This machine, old and often cantankerous for others, felt like an extension of herself. It understood her touch, responded to her care in ways it denied the hurried prodding of less patient hands. "Almost time, old friend," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. She checked the drone's fuel lines, the integrity of its optical sensors, her movements unhurried, thorough. As she leaned closer to inspect a seal near the engine nacelle, her watch strap slipped, revealing the small faded tattoo on her inner wrist, a delicate nightshade blossom, its petals rendered in a single, unbroken line of faded black ink. For a fleeting moment, the sterile scent of the hangar was replaced by the phantom smell of damp earth and cordite. A cacophony of shouts, the roar of rotors, the searing flash of an explosion, ghosts of a past that never truly slept. She blinked, the images receding, leaving behind the quiet hum of the hangar's ventilation system. She adjusted her watch strap, the blossom vanishing once more. Her past was a locked room, the key hidden deep. Here, with Argus, she found a measure of solace, a purpose that asked nothing of that past, only her skill in the present. The drone was more than metal and wire to her. It was a silent confidant, a partner in vigilance. She knew its every rivet, every whine of its servos, and it, in turn, seemed to know her. The mess hall buzzed with the nervous energy of impending deployment for Iron Gauntlet. Alara sat alone at a small table in the corner, methodically eating her meal. A group of younger officers, including Lieutenant Davies, occupied a nearby table, their voices loud, their laughter edged with bravado. They were discussing the complexities of modern warfare, the obsolescence of older tactics, older soldiers. "It's all about network-centric operations now," one captain declared, gesturing expansively. "The individual on the ground? Almost irrelevant without the tech," Davies chimed in. "Exactly. The days of Rambo are long gone. This isn't your granddad's army." His gaze flickered towards Alara, a subtle, derisive implication in his tone, as if her quiet presence, her perceived simplicity, embodied the very obsolescence they were decrying. Alara continued to eat, her expression unreadable. She took a sip of water. The captain then spoke of the need for dynamic leadership, for thinking outside the box, phrases that sounded impressive but often masked a lack of fundamental understanding. Alara finished her meal. As she rose to leave, she paused briefly near their table. She didn't look directly at them, her voice low but carrying in a momentary lull in their conversation. "The most advanced network is only as strong as the node that refuses to break under pressure." It wasn't a challenge, merely a statement, delivered with the weight of undisputed fact. A sudden silence fell over the officers' table. Davies opened his mouth, then closed it, a flush rising on his neck. The captain stared at her, retreating back, a thoughtful frown replacing his earlier confidence. Alara walked away without a backward glance, leaving them to their theories. Her quiet strength, her grounded certainty, had a way of puncturing inflated egos more effectively than any shouted retort. She understood networks, both human and electronic, in ways they could not yet imagine. The storm hit without warning, a furious squall that turned the dusty training grounds into a maelstrom of wind and driving rain. Iron Gauntlet had been underway for 6 hours, and units were dispersed, testing their ability to operate independently. Communications, already strained by the exercise's simulated jamming, became genuinely fragmented. Colonel Thorne, at the Tactical Operations Center, watched the weather displays with growing concern. Reports of flash floods and downed trees started trickling in. Then, the main comms tower took a lightning strike. The TOC was plunged into an eerie silence, broken only by the howl of the wind outside and the frantic clicks of keyboards as technicians struggled to restore links. Thorne felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. He had multiple teams unaccounted for, operating in areas now deemed hazardous. Alara was with a forward logistics unit, tasked with resupplying an isolated reconnaissance platoon. Their convoy, including Private Sharma, and, by unfortunate coincidence, Lieutenant Davies, who had hitched a ride to observe their efficiency, was caught in a narrow ravine when a torrent of water, dislodged by the storm, surged down the embankment. Their primary vehicle, a heavy truck, slewed sideways, its engine drowned, blocking the narrow track. Panic flared. The young driver was frozen, eyes wide with fear. Davies, soaked and shivering, began to shout contradictory orders, his voice thin against the roar of the elements. The ravine was rapidly becoming a death trap. Lieutenant Davies, his face pale, yelled about protocols, about waiting for instructions that clearly weren't coming. The gully walls were slick mud, the rising water already lapping at the hubcaps of their disabled truck. Private Sharma, though frightened, kept her wits, trying to calm the near-hysterical driver. Alara moved. She didn't wait for consensus or issue commands. Her actions were her orders. She first checked the truck, a quick professional assessment, immobilized. Then her eyes scanned the treacherous slopes of the ravine, her gaze sharp, analytical, like a predator seeking an escape route. "Ropes," she said, her voice cutting through Davies' panic tirade. "In the rear compartment! Sharma, with me! Davies, keep your men from rushing!" One at a time. Her calm was a stark contrast to the surrounding chaos. Davies, stunned into momentary silence by her sheer assumption of command, found himself nodding mutely. Alara and Sharma retrieved the emergency gear. With an efficiency that spoke of long practice, Alara secured a line to a sturdy-looking outcrop of rock, high on the ravine wall, testing it with her full weight. Her movements were fluid, precise, wasting no energy. She demonstrated a knot Sharma had never seen, one that tightened under load but was easily released. You first, Sharma. Then the driver. Then the others. I'll belay from here. Davies, you're last before me. There was no room for argument in her tone. One by one, she guided them up the slick, unstable slope, her instructions brief, her hands strong and steady on the rope, countering their slips, encouraging them when fear threatened to paralyze. She moved with an ageless competence, a primal understanding of terrain and leverage that no manual could teach. The wind tore at her, rain streamed down her face, but her focus was absolute. She was a lifeline in the maelstrom. Back at the struggling Tactical Operations Center, Colonel Thorne felt the crushing weight of responsibility. His command network was crippled, his units scattered and vulnerable. The storm showed no signs of abating. The loss of Argus, grounded by its earlier, though now resolved, guidance issues, felt particularly acute. They were blind. Suddenly, a junior technician monitoring auxiliary channels exclaimed, "Sir, I'm picking up a faint telemetry signal. Unidentified drone, but it's transmitting data packets. Encrypted, but it's strong." Thorne was at his side instantly. "Source, can you get a visual?" The technician worked furiously. It's Argus, sir, but that's impossible. It wasn't cleared for flight, and we have no pilot link." On a secondary screen, a grainy image resolved. A bird's-eye view of the flooded training area, relayed with surprising clarity despite the storm. The drone was maneuvering with uncanny skill, navigating the turbulent air currents, its camera panning across critical sectors, identifying stranded units, pinpointing safe evacuation routes. "Who the hell launched it?" Thorne demanded. No one had an answer. Then a voice cut through the faint static of the drone's audio feed. Calm, precise, relaying coordinates, assessing damage, guiding a lost patrol. "Recon Team Bravo, this is Nightshade. I have visual. Proceed bearing 0905 for 300 meters. High ground accessible. Acknowledge. Nightshade." The call sign resonated in the deepest recesses of Thorne's memory, a ghost from a distant, harsher war. The voice was female, devoid of panic, utterly professional. It was Alara's voice. In Hangar 7, where she had evidently returned after ensuring her small group was safe, Alara sat before a makeshift command console she'd jury-rigged, her fingers flying over controls that were supposed to be inert. She had bypassed the local network lockout, hot-wired a direct link to Argus's transponder, and coaxed the old bird into the sky. Her face, illuminated by the screen's glow, was a mask of intense concentration. Argus was her partner, dancing through the storm at her command, its electronic eyes, her eyes, extending her senses across the chaos. She was not just flying a drone, she was orchestrating a rescue, one calm instruction at a time. As dawn broke, the storm finally subsided, leaving behind a landscape of devastation, but, miraculously, no serious casualties. Iron Gauntlet was in ruins, but lives had been saved. The scattered units, guided by the mysterious Nightshade and the all-seeing Argus, had found safety or been reached by rescue teams. The reports filtering back to Colonel Thorne were consistent. The drone, appearing out of nowhere, had been their salvation, and the calm, authoritative voice had been their guide. Private Sharma, her earlier fear replaced by a profound awe, recounted how Master Sergeant Vance had led them from the flooded ravine, her skills nothing short of astonishing. Lieutenant Davies, humbled and subdued, offered a terse confirmation of Sharma's account, his usual arrogance conspicuously absent. He spoke of a competence he couldn't fathom, a level of fieldcraft he'd only read about in historical texts. Other units, those guided by Argus's remote eyes, spoke of Nightshade with a kind of reverence. The name, whispered through the comms during the height of the crisis, had already taken on a legendary quality. Alara herself had said little since returning to the main base, merely ensuring Argus was safely recovered and stowed, then quietly resuming her duties in Hangar 7 as if nothing extraordinary had occurred. But the atmosphere around her had shifted. The whispers followed her now, no longer dismissive, but filled with curiosity and respect. The ghost everyone saw but no one noticed had become the enigma everyone was desperate to understand. Colonel Marcus Thorne sat in his office, the early morning light casting long shadows. The reports on his desk painted a clear picture. Without the intervention of Argus and the operator known as Nightshade, the outcome of the storm would have been catastrophic. He replayed the audio log of Nightshade's transmissions, the calm, steady voice cutting through the storm's fury. He had instructed his aide to bring Master Sergeant Alara Vance to his office. He needed answers. Who was this quiet technician who could command the field like a seasoned general and fly a drone like an ace pilot under impossible conditions? When Alara entered, she stood before his desk, her posture erect but not rigid, her expression neutral. She met his gaze directly, without deference but also without challenge. "Master Sergeant Vance," Thorne began, his voice carefully controlled. "The reports from yesterday's incident are quite extraordinary. Your actions, specifically." Alara inclined her head slightly. "I did what was necessary, sir." Thorne leaned forward. "What was necessary involved skills far beyond the scope of a maintenance technician. Piloting Argus in those conditions, coordinating rescue efforts, the field craft reported by Lieutenant Davies. Your file, Sergeant, is remarkably unremarkable for someone of your apparent capabilities. It's clean. Almost too clean." He paused, his eyes narrowing. "Who are you, Master Sergeant?" Alara's gaze did not waver. She remained silent, the quiet stretching between them. Thorne felt a familiar frustration rising, the kind he experienced when faced with obfuscation, with secrets deliberately kept. He had a right to know who was operating with such clandestine expertise within his command. Colonel Thorne, his patience wearing thin in the face of Alara's continued silence, turned to his terminal. "If you won't tell me, Sergeant, perhaps your complete record will." His aide had already flagged it for his attention, noting its unusual access restrictions. He entered his highest-level command override codes. The screen flickered, and Alara Vance's full, unredacted service record scrolled into view. Thorne's breath caught in his throat. Commendation after commendation, citations for valor, distinguished service medals. Elite training schools, SEER, Advanced Airborne, Special Forces Qualification Course, blacked-out entries for specialized intelligence and direct action programs. Mission deployments to clandestine locations across the globe, years of service in units whose very existence was classified. His eyes scanned down the list of special assignments, of operations known only to a select few. Then, he saw it. A commendation for exceptional bravery during Operation Desert Serpent. A deep reconnaissance mission that had gone disastrously wrong nearly 15 years prior. And beneath the awarding officer's name for that commendation, a signature, his own, Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Thorne, SOC Forward. He remembered the mission vividly, the young operative, call sign Nightshade, whose intelligence and raw courage had saved the remnants of her team, including him, pinned down and surrounded. He remembered signing that commendation, recommending her for a field promotion, marveling at her composure under unimaginable fire. He looked up from the screen, his mind reeling, at the quiet, unassuming woman standing before him. The years had etched lines on her face, silvered her hair, but the eyes, those steady, knowing eyes, were the same. "Nightshade," he breathed, the name a near-forgotten echo from his own past. "Alara Vance. It can't be." But it was. The ghost from Hangar 7 was a legend he himself had helped create, then forgotten in the fog of time and career progression. The woman he had barely registered, the technician he had overlooked, was one of the finest operatives he had ever known. A wave of emotions washed over Colonel Thorne, shock, profound respect, and a deep, unsettling shame for his own blindness. "All this time," he said, his voice hoarse with the realization, "you've been here, in Hangar 7. Why?" He looked at her, truly seeing her now, not as Master Sergeant Vance, the quiet technician, but as Nightshade, the operative who had walked through fire and emerged unbroken. Alara's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "I needed the quiet, sir," she said, her voice low. "The machines, they don't have agendas. They just need to work." "There's an honesty in that." She paused. "And Argus needed someone who understood him." Thorne nodded slowly, the pieces falling into place. The years of high-intensity operations, the constant threat, the weight of secrets, it would take its toll on anyone. He remembered her from then, a young woman already possessing an old soul, a fierce dedication tempered by a quiet sorrow. He had championed her for a special operations group, signing off on her transfer, recognizing a rare talent. And then, like so many bright flames in that shadowy world, she had vanished from his direct purview, absorbed into the deeper echelons of clandestine service. "The things you did yesterday," Thorne said, his voice filled with a new awe. "You saved lives, Sergeant. Many lives." Alara simply met his gaze. "That's what we do, sir. Or what we try to do." No hint of arrogance, no seeking of praise, just a statement of fact, a code she still lived by, even in the self-imposed quiet of her current life. The institutional arrogance, the military bureaucracy, the casual dismissals she had endured, they seemed petty and insignificant now in the face of who she truly was. He, Colonel Marcus Thorne, had been part of that system of dismissal, however unintentionally. Word, as it always does in the closed world of a military base, began to spread. Not from Alara, who remained as reserved as ever, and not directly from Colonel Thorne, who handled the official commendations with quiet gravity. It spread through the hushed, awestruck conversations of the soldiers who had witnessed her actions firsthand, from Private Sharma's wide-eyed accounts, from the grudging respect in Lieutenant Davies's voice as he described her impossible ascent from the ravine. The story of Argus, the old drone brought to life in the storm by a mysterious pilot named Nightshade, took on mythic proportions. The name Alara Vance became linked with that myth. The mechanics in Hangar 7 now watched her with a mixture of reverence and trepidation, their earlier jokes forgotten. Sergeant Miller, the cynical comms NCO, sought her out to ask a technical question about an old piece of radio gear, his gruffness overlaid with a newfound deference. Lieutenant Davies encountered her near the training grounds a few days later. He hesitated, then approached, his usual confidence absent. "Master Sergeant Vance," he began, then stopped, unsure what to say. He looked down, then met her eyes. "Thank you," he said, the words simple, heartfelt. "For everything." Alara merely nodded, a flicker of understanding in her eyes. The transformation was palpable. The institutional arrogance had cracked, the assumptions shattered by the undeniable truth of her competence. They saw her now, not as an aging technician or an overlooked woman, but as a quiet sentinel who had walked among them, her true capabilities hidden until the moment they were most needed. Respect, hard-earned and undeniable, settled around her like a mantle. Alara stood in the familiar quiet of Hangar 7, the late afternoon sun casting long, peaceful shadows. Argus rested in its bay, its sensors cleaned, its systems powered down, but it seemed to hum with a residual energy, a shared memory of the storm. She ran a hand along its cool metallic skin, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. The faint, faded nightshade blossom on her wrist was, for a moment, unobscured as she adjusted a tie-down strap. The scent of oil, hydraulic fluid, and worn metal was a comforting balm. Private Sharma entered the hangar, ostensibly to check on a toolkit, but her gaze lingered on Alara. There was a new light in the young soldier's eyes, not just admiration, but a dawning comprehension of what true strength, true discipline, really meant. It wasn't about loudness or swagger. It was about the quiet, unwavering core. From the doorway of his office overlooking the hangar floor, Colonel Thorne watched Alara. His face was thoughtful, humbled. He had demanded to know who she was, and in finding out, he had rediscovered a part of his own history and a profound lesson in leadership. That true worth often resides in the quietest corners, unassuming, until duty calls it forth. Alara picked up a wrench, her movements unhurried, purposeful. She turned to a waiting engine stand, the next task already claiming her focus. The dust motes danced in the fading light, settling softly on the still air. She sought no accolades, no special recognition. The quiet respect of those around her, the silent thrum of well-maintained machinery, the enduring bond with her old partner Argus, these were enough. The ghost of Hangar 7 was finally seen, not for the shadows of her past, but for the steady light of her present.